In Graham, Washington, a rented house in flames. Inside, 3 bodies lie hidden beneath the rubble. They are 39-year-old Josh Powell and his 2 little boys, 7-year-old Charlie and 5-year-old Braden. Just moments earlier, a distraught social worker had called 911 with a horrifying report: "He's got the kids in the house and he won't let me in." Please help this channel grow, like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Soon after, she screamed into the phone, "He exploded the house." Investigators later determined that Josh Powell had locked the children inside, poured gasoline, and deliberately set the fire that consumed them. For the outside world, this brutal murder-suicide answered one question but posed another far darker mystery: what happened to Susan Powell, Josh's wife and the boy's mother, who had vanished over 2 years earlier? Susan Cox Powell was a 28-year-old mother of 2, living with her family in West Valley City, Utah. A devout Latter-day Saint, she had met Josh at a church dance and married him in 2001. She worked at a Wells Fargo bank and doted on their sons, Charlie and Braden. On the surface, it was a typical young family. But behind closed doors, Susan's diaries and emails reveal a marriage in turmoil. By mid-2008, she was warning friends that something was very wrong. In one tearful email she insisted that Josh will go to counseling for himself and/or meds to deal with his mental issues, and that if he refused, she would divorce. She pleaded, "I want him in counseling, on meds, I want my husband, friend, lover back, no more crazy, outrageous beliefs." She even recorded videos of herself documenting family assets, joking, "covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me, or my kids." By June 2008 Susan had already written a secret letter and stashed it in a safe deposit box. In it she flatly warned, "If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." She also explicitly distrusted Josh's father, Stephen Powell, whom she described in her journals as a pedophile, and begged Josh to cut ties with him. Years later Stephen would be convicted of secretly videotaping young girls, including Susan, and he has denied any role in Susan's disappearance. Susan's correspondence from 2008 shows she was fearful and felt cornered. "Josh Powell said he would kill me before agreeing to a divorce," she wrote to a sister. She worried constantly, asking in 2008, "Will he do something irrational? Do I need to pack up kids and run? Will he hurt me and/or take the kids, hurt them?" In the months before she vanished, Susan's anxiety only deepened. In late 2009 she told friends she had moved important documents and money to her office as backup. She quietly filed divorce paperwork with her parents' help, believing a divorce wouldn't be as bad as him kidnapping the kids and taking me for broke. Investigators later noted that on November 13, 2009, weeks before her disappearance, someone had smashed a camera and tent out of a toy-strewn garage at the Powell home, a strange incident Susan feared was an attempted house break-in by someone who might want to get to her. Though no one was hurt that night, police found the home sealed off with cheap box fans blowing on a wet carpet as if to erase evidence. At that point Susan's worst fears were clear: she was in danger from the very man she married. Then came the night of December 6, 2009. Josh told friends Susan decided to join him on a midnight camping trip, but that she changed her mind at the last moment and stayed home. He claimed to have bundled the boys into their van and driven them into the desert alone. But in the morning, neighbors sensed something was wrong. Susan never showed up for work. Early on December 7, Josh's own family called police in panic. Josh had gone on the supposed camping trip, the boys were nowhere to be seen at daycare, and no one had heard from Susan. Officers forced open the house, fearing carbon monoxide poisoning, but they found it empty and chillingly odd. In the living room were 2 box fans blowing on a spot of wet carpet. Susan's purse and ID lay on the couch, her cell phone was found locked in Josh's van, the SIM card ripped out. There was no trace of her. Charlie and Braden slept in tiny beds like usual, toys scattered on the floor. It was as if Susan had simply vanished into thin air. Josh claimed that after leaving Susan sleeping, he'd awakened the boys and taken them on a snowy camping trip just hours after midnight. But this story immediately rang hollow to detectives who already knew Josh was the main person of interest. The victims in this tragedy are Susan and her two little boys, Charlie and Braden. The prime suspect is Susan's husband, Josh Powell. Also involved are Josh's father, Stephen Powell, later jailed for voyeurism, and Josh's brother, Michael. All three men would later die under mysterious circumstances or prison guard. Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, fought for custody of their grandsons, and her close friends like Kiersey Helluel hoped for justice. By the end of 2009, Utah media had dubbed this the missing mom case, and each new detail, Susan's secret will and diary warnings, the Erie garage incident, the van with Susan's phone piled pressure on Josh Powell, though he steadfastly insisted his wife had simply disappeared. The mystery of what really happened to Susan Powell begins in the dead of night. Officially, the crime is Susan's disappearance. No body has ever been found, and to this day her fate is unknown. But the pieces of that night can be pieced together from interviews, evidence, and the haunting remnants she left behind. In the suspenseful retelling below, we reconstruct the unfolding tragedy. By 10 p.m. on December 6, Susan had put Charlie and Braden to bed. She told friends she was exhausted and still had work to do. Josh still had errands to run, including a surprise trip to buy a camping tent for an upcoming Boy Scout outing. Suddenly around midnight, something shifted. According to Josh, he returned home, found Susan awake, and proposed a family mini-camping trip to get the boys out of the house for a few hours. Josh claimed Susan agreed, but then inexplicably changed her mind at the last second. He said Susan packed herself a bag and stayed home. He bundled Charlie and Braden into his van, drove them to the nearby Lone Pine campground in freezing weather, and said goodnight to Susan through the telephone. We must note, none of this has ever been independently verified. Only Josh was present, and Susan was gone the next morning. Investigators immediately questioned this narrative. How could Susan quietly pack a bag and stay home without raising suspicion? Josh's story had many holes. For one, phone records confirmed Josh's last known call with Susan was around midnight, and after that he suddenly left without explaining why. Early on December 7, when the boys didn't arrive at daycare, Josh's own mother Terrica and sister Jennifer called police. Officers arrived at the Powell home around 9 a.m., fearing carbon monoxide poisoning or an accident. They broke in, finding Charlie and Braden safe but wide awake in their beds. Susan was nowhere to be seen. Puzzlingly, police noticed two box fans blowing over a wet spot on the living room carpet, as if someone had tried to clean up a spill. Susan's personal effects were untouched, her purse, wallet, and even her slippers sat on a chair. In Josh's van, police found Susan's locked cell phone and curiously, its SIM card had been ripped out. Also in the van were camping supplies that belonged to Susan, sleeping bags, blankets, gas canisters, a shovel and tarps. Josh claimed they packed these for the camping trip. But detectives were skeptical, the gear suggested careful planning, and Josh struggled to explain key details. For example, when asked why he claimed not to have a phone charger on the trip, an officer noticed his phone was in fact charging in his vehicle. Over the next hours, detectives pieced together more. Josh was taken to the station for questioning. Hours earlier, a West Valley City police detective had spotted cuts on Josh's hands, which Josh dismissed as from work. On December 8, Charlie told investigators Susan went with us to the campsite, but she didn't come back. This was a bombshell, a child's assertion that the mother was alive that night but did not return. A few weeks later at school, Charlie frightened a teacher by saying Mommy is dead. Little Braden drew a chilling picture, a van with 3 stick figures and a speech bubble, Mommy was in the trunk. That simple drawing matched Charlie's story. Police would later credit these young boys with very sharp memories. Meanwhile, Josh had not stayed put. That same morning after initial questioning, he had inexplicably hired a rental car and driven over 800 miles around Utah and Idaho before returning 2 days later, placing even more miles on the odometer. He said he was just looking for Susan or clearing his head, but the secrecy looked suspicious. By midday December 9, detectives executed a search warrant at the Powell home. Inside, the crime scene was chilling. Susan's blood was found in several places, a large pool and smear on the living room floor next to a covered sofa, where it appeared someone had tried to clean it with cleaning fluid and a rug. The blood evidence was compelling. DNA confirmed at least one sample was Susan's. A handwritten letter scribbled by Susan was also found. In it she warned friends about Josh's instability and urged them that if she died it might not be an accident. Investigators also discovered Susan's life insurance policies, each for $1.5 million, listing Josh as the beneficiary. Every piece of evidence from that fateful night pointed suspicion squarely at Josh Powell. Imagine the scene: two frantic little boys, his own children, and their distraught mother's blood in the home, and he alone drove the van away. The police viewed Josh not just as a grieving husband, but as the primary suspect in an apparent murder. Indeed, within days he became a person of interest. Utah media reported that colleagues knew Josh had even talked about how to hide a body in an abandoned mineshaft. Family members, too, were divided. Susan's own relatives believed the worst. Josh's family insisted he was innocent. In this crime scene reconstruction, one thing is clear: Susan Powell was gone, presumed dead, and every tangible clue hinted she did not disappear of her own accord. The only question remaining was what happened next, how detectives followed these clues and what they uncovered in the investigation. The search for Susan Powell turned into a complex investigation spanning states and years. We break down the key steps of that official inquiry, as well as how the community responded with its own theories. Remember, these remain speculation, not evidence. West Valley City Police in Utah led the probe. They wasted no time interviewing everyone close to Susan. Josh Powell consistently refused to admit any wrongdoing. He hired a lawyer and insisted he loved Susan. Meanwhile, investigators dredged the rental car Josh used. A bloodhound detected the scent of a human corpse in the trunk. Police learned Josh had taken the children to his father Stephen's house in Puyallup, Washington, for the holidays in late 2009. Susan had not gone with them. On December 9, Utah authorities broke into the Powell home and seized evidence. They also issued subpoenas for all footage of Josh's TV interviews. He had already appeared on national news claiming he was in over his head. Crews combed the Utah desert near Tooele County, retracing Josh's claimed camping route. They found no campsite. Inside the house, forensic teams documented Susan's blood and that cleaned-up scene. The blood smears and Susan's missing phone implied foul play. As investigators scoured the evidence, one break came. A cadaver dog in Oregon had picked up Susan's scent on a car trunk that belonged to Josh's brother Michael, who had recently sold the car. Police dusted the car for DNA and sent it for testing, but samples were inconclusive. Detectives also looked at Josh's relatives. Josh's father Stephen emerged as a troubled figure. In early 2010, investigators raided his home in Puyallup and found thousands of hidden photos of Susan, often sexualized, which he had taken without her consent. Police later charged Stephen with voyeurism and child pornography in relation to other crimes, though he denied killing Susan. Josh's brothers Michael and John, and his sister Alina, were interviewed. Michael had already attracted suspicion by selling his junked car. None of the Powell men have publicly admitted any knowledge of Susan's fate. In July 2010, Josh lost his job in Utah and moved with his sons to Washington to live with Stephen. Meanwhile in Utah, Susan's parents Chuck and Judy Cox gathered evidence of the marital discord, including Susan's journals and that deposit box letter. The public and media became aware of Susan's dire writings. By late 2010, West Valley police were officially treating the case as a homicide investigation. They had no body, but with the blood and other evidence they said Susan was presumed murdered by her husband, who remained the chief suspect. Meanwhile, unknown to Utah investigators, Washington courts were unknowingly setting the stage for the next turn: custody battles. Susan's parents had moved to Washington to help raise the boys. In late 2011, a Pierce County judge ruled that Chuck and Judy Cox would keep custody, pending psychological evaluations of Josh. The hearing had been painful. Josh reacted violently at times, and didn't take well to being told the boys would stay with their grandparents. In documents filed in that case, Josh claimed he was a loving father and accused the Coxes of bias. But the judge ordered Josh to undergo a court-ordered psychosexual evaluation and even drug tests after police told them Josh had seen disturbing cartoon child pornography on his computer. Suspiciously, weeks before the explosion, police in Utah had found about 400 graphic cartoon images on Josh's computer. Under the stress of the custody fight and with legal pressure mounting, Josh Powell was a man under a dark shadow. On the morning of February 5, 2012, social worker Elizabeth Hall arrived at Josh's rented house in South Hill, Washington, to supervise a court-ordered visit with the boys. Minutes earlier, a judge had denied Josh's bid to regain custody until he completed his evaluations. Unsettlingly, the children had been picked up from their grandparents' home and ran to Josh's waiting car, excited for the visit. The social worker, however, saw something was wrong. She heard one child crying and smelled gasoline as the boys entered the home. On the 911 recording she frantically explained, "The kids went into the house and the parent. Josh Powell will not let me in the door." She knew danger was imminent. When dispatchers asked what to do, she said it could be life-threatening, and pleaded for help. Seconds later she shouted through the window for Josh to let her in, but he just shut the door in her face. Moments later, around 12:30 p.m., the house exploded in a fireball. Fire crews and deputies arrived within minutes. By early afternoon, all three bodies were recovered from the charred bedroom. Coroner's reports showed young Charlie and Braden had been struck by a hatchet before the fire engulfed the house, evidence that the attack was not only premeditated but monstrous. Josh Powell's own scorched remains were found beside them. On scene, investigators called it a double murder-suicide. Josh had apparently trapped the boys inside and poured accelerant throughout the house, then ignited it. One sheriff's detective said flatly, "Everything that happened was intentional." Investigators quickly seized Josh's computers and emails. One of the most damning clues was an email sent by Josh to his attorney, arriving just minutes before the blast. It read, "I'm sorry, goodbye." In later interviews, Josh's attorney confirmed the note was from his client. Authorities interpreted it as Josh's confession of intent. Indeed, Pierce County Sheriff's investigators said the fire was very well planned and used an accelerant to ensure the house burned rapidly. A spokeswoman later said, "No one had any idea he had anything like this planned." In Washington, this scene, father and sons dead in an inferno, could have ended the Susan Powell saga. There was only one suspect left alive in Susan's case, and he was already gone. As news of the explosion broke, internet sleuths and true crime communities lit up with theories. Some people wondered if Josh had co-conspirators, perhaps his brother Michael or father Stephen, helping to dispose of Susan's body. Others speculated wildly about possible burial sites, too many to list, or claimed the mysterious SusanPowell.org website, now known to have been run by Josh and Stephen, held clues. For example, that site had floated a bizarre theory that Susan ran off with a missing journalist to Brazil. In forums, commenters pointed to every small detail: why were box fans running, why were the van's gear prepped, and even debated Josh's sanity or supposed satanic leanings. Important disclaimer: these online theories remain unproven speculation. No official evidence has confirmed them. Investigators always emphasize facts over conjecture. Without a body or witness, Susan's fate was never conclusively solved. Still, this outpouring of public intrigue shows how a true crime grips people's imaginations. For those following the case, every clue or red herring spawns new questions. Did Susan know she was in danger? Did she write more notes we never found? The mystery only deepened in the public eye. Throughout the investigation, Utah's authorities remained in close contact with Washington investigators. West Valley City Police Chief Buzz Nielsen later told KUTV, "This is obviously just evil. Josh wiped out the whole family. So selfish. He lamented that Susan's disappearance would likely never be resolved with Josh dead. Quite frankly, this will never be solved. Utah detectives continued pursuing every possible clue. They checked mines in Nevada and Utah for burial sites, scoured interviews, and even had cadaver dogs revisit sites such as Topaz Mountain where traces of disturbance were found. Despite these efforts, by mid-2012 the case was effectively cold. The tragic finale came swiftly. Susan Powell was never found, and justice in her disappearance was never achieved through the courts. After the 2012 explosion, officials officially closed the criminal investigation in Utah, calling it a no-body, no-trial scenario especially since Josh was dead. In Washington, authorities ruled Josh's act a double murder-suicide. The boys, Charlie and Braden, were laid to rest together in a local cemetery. Their grandmother Judy wept as she placed their tiny shoes by their flag-draped caskets. Susan's parents were left without any remains of their daughter, as helpless as ever. Chuck Cox said only that he and Judy were absolutely devastated and finally, after years of agony, they could give their grandsons a proper funeral. Legally, there were no criminal charges to pursue. Josh's death meant he would never answer for Susan's fate. His brother Michael, already arrested separately in 2010 for unrelated crimes, took his own life in prison in April 2013. His father Stephen remained incarcerated for his voyeurism conviction and was widely mistrusted by Susan's family. He died of a heart attack in 2018 at age 72, still denying involvement in Susan's case. In 2013, Utah police announced that they now believe Josh Powell had killed Susan and that Michael likely helped dispose of her body, but without a body, these remain suspicions. In other words, no one was ever tried or convicted for Susan's disappearance. Officially, her death certificate was only signed years later in Utah, declaring her presumed deceased. In the media, the story maintained its grip for a while. Documentaries and crime shows covered the Powell case, often highlighting Susan's eerie journal entries like "If I die it may not be an accident." The letter she wrote in 2008 was circulated as a chilling warning. Commentators noted the cruel symmetry. Susan had feared for her life, and in the end she became the permanent missing person. The explosion and murder-suicide, as one reporter put it, was the final act of the Susan Powell saga. Utah's West Valley City Police Chief Buzz Nielsen and investigators admitted that without Josh alive, they feared it will never be solved. Still, Susan's sister Denise and friend Kiersey remained determined to keep her memory alive, contacting true crime writers and maintaining a Facebook page with updates on the boys' birthdays. Kiersey cried out at the time, "He took Susan, and now he's murdered her children. He's a monster." Susan's employers and friends remember her as caring and resilient. Surprisingly, her anguished letter and death warning have had a wider impact. In the years after, it was cited in advocacy for domestic abuse victims, reminding women to heed warning signs in marriages. Every December 7th, Susan's family holds a moment of silence. Even though the case remains technically unsolved, the consensus is clear: they will never stop searching for Susan, even if only in memories. Susan Powell's story is a haunting reminder that truth can be elusive. A young mother who pleaded for help was gone within moments, and the answers vanished with her husband's flames. In this true crime, every chapter was drenched in tragedy and unanswered questions. We saw love turn dark, family bonds shattered, and two innocent boys lost in an act of pure evil. As investigators said at the end, sometimes there are no more questions, only the emptiness left behind. What can we learn? Perhaps that we must listen to the warnings people give us, no matter how unbelievable. Susan left behind a final message about not trusting her husband, but even that couldn't save her. Her fate remains a mystery. As Susan's friend Kiersey said, "We still don't know what happened, and now he's gone and we don't have any way of getting answers." The community is left with pieces of a puzzle: Susan's typed and written pleas, the boys' innocent artwork, and the scorched ruins of Josh's house. In the end, Susan Powell's tale ends the way all true crime should, not with a question hanging in the air. We may never find her body or fully understand her last hours. But remembering her story keeps her voice alive, a voice that said something's wrong, even when no one could stop the worst from happening. Perhaps the only thing we can do is honor Susan's memory by taking seriously the signs of desperation she left behind and by continuing to seek justice for the innocent lives caught in her shadow. The flames have cooled, the dust has settled, but the question of what really happened to Susan Powell remains out there, waiting for the answers that may one day come.